the United States of America. Today, it's a global superpower. But 250 years ago, it didn't even exist. It was just a collection of 13 small colonies ruled by a king thousands of miles away across the Atlantic Ocean. How did these colonies defeat the world's greatest empire to become a free nation? Today, we are going to dive into the real, gritty and inspiring story of the birth of the USA. By the mid-1700s, Great Britain ruled 13 colonies in North America. People came here from Europe for many reasons, some for religious freedom, others for land and a better life. For a long time, the colonists were happy to be British subjects. They fought alongside British soldiers and saw themselves as part of the mighty British Empire. But everything changed after the French and Indian War ended in 1763. Britain was deeply in debt after the war and started demanding taxes from the colonists to pay it off. They passed laws like the Stamp Act, which taxed paper goods, and later the Tea Act. The colonists were furious, not just because of the money, but because they had no voice in the British Parliament. Their cry became no taxation without representation. This wasn't just a catchy slogan, it was the core of their entire argument. They believed their rights as Englishmen were being violated. Tensions boiled over, protests and boycotts spread through the colonies. In 1773, a group of colonists in Boston, disguised as Native Americans, dumped an entire shipment of British tea into the harbor. This bold act of defiance became known as the Boston Tea Party. Britain's response was swift and harsh. They passed what the colonists called the Intolerable Acts, closing Boston Harbor and stripping Massachusetts of its self-government. This was the final straw. Instead of crushing the rebellion, it united the colonies against a common enemy. In 1774, delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies met in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. They weren't calling for independence just yet, but they demanded that their rights be respected. King George III refused. The very next year, in April 1775, the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord. The shot heard round the world had been fired. The American Revolutionary War had begun. The Continental Army, led by the steadfast George Washington, was a ragtag force of farmers and merchants. They were up against the most powerful military machine on the planet. The early years were brutal. The colonists suffered devastating losses and endured incredible hardships, like the freezing winter at Valley Forge. But they had something the British didn't. They were fighting for their homes, their families, and the dream of a new kind of nation. As the war raged on, the idea of complete separation from Britain grew stronger. On July 4, 1776, the Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, a revolutionary document penned primarily by Thomas Jefferson. It declared that all men are created equal, with rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was a bold, world-changing statement. The war was far from over. The turning point came in 1777 at the Battle of Saratoga. The American victory convinced France, Britain's old rival, to officially enter the war on the American side. French money, troops, and naval power were game changers. With this crucial support, the tide began to turn. Finally, in 1781, the combined American and French forces trapped the main British army under General Cornwallis at Yorktown, Virginia. Surrounded by land and sea, Cornwallis had no choice but to surrender. The fighting was effectively over. 2 years later, in 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed. Great Britain officially recognized the independence of the United States. From a collection of angry colonies to a sovereign nation, the birth of the USA was a messy, bloody, and incredibly inspiring struggle. It was a victory against impossible odds, fueled by a powerful idea that ordinary people have the right to govern themselves. This revolution didn't just create a new country, it ignited a fire for freedom that would spread across the globe. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments what part of the American Revolution you find most interesting. See you next time.